So everyone, welcome back to Orthodoxy 201. We have been looking at the section on the Logos, and last time we discussed the relationship between science and religion from a historical perspective. We saw that initially there was a view of integration, that science and religion were seen as complements of one another. Of course, this is how the scientific revolution began. The early scientists were believers, not just in God who created the world, but also a God who gifted them with intelligence and who made the world intelligible. And there was a correlation and integration between God, man, and the creation. In time, we saw the development of an alternative view, and that is one of conflict, where science and religion were seen to be in opposition to one another. And that is one of the dominant views that we see today. But that wasn't the only view. It wasn't just integration or conflict. There also developed the idea of independence, that science and religion each operate in their own domains, in their own spheres, and they address their own types of questions. Science often dealing with how, and religion dealing with questions of why, purpose, and meaning. But as I said last time, we see a return, actually, of the integration view based upon scientific discoveries in the last 100 or so years. I actually believe that this will become the dominant view once again. You'll always have people who will reject God and any kind of theistic understanding of the world. And you'll always have people who will believe that religion and science have to go their own ways. But I think that the scientific discoveries of late are really pointing extremely strongly to the integration view. And that is that both science and religion point to God. So last time, today, and for the next few sessions, we'll be focusing on just that view of integration. We looked at this quote from Warren Heinsberg, the father of quantum physics. The first gulp of the glass of natural sciences will make you an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. As a warm-up exercise, we looked at the phenomenon of the solar eclipse and how we're the only planet in the solar system that you can observe a full solar eclipse, something that is a remarkable thing to witness, but also something that is highly improbable, of almost astronomical proportions, the improbability of witnessing such an event. And yet we're able to witness it from Earth, and that points to the special perspective that we have from Earth. In the book, The Privileged Planet, the author goes into his case that Earth is kind of the perfect laboratory by which we can observe the universe and conduct scientific experiments and come to understand the created order and the beauty and the harmony and the reason and purpose behind it, all of which does point to God, but it also allows us to do science at a level that would not be able to be reached if we were on other planets. So it makes the case that the Earth is a privileged planet for not just the theist, the one who believes in God as the creator, but also the scientist, the one who wants to observe and understand the universe. So of the major scientific discoveries in the last 100 or so years, we mentioned the expanding universe, the finely tuned universe, the complexity of the cell, and DNA or genetic code. And we'll be looking at these throughout these next sessions. Last time, we took the expanding universe and the finely tuned universe. The expanding universe was discovered through the shift in light and how it was seen that the stars and the planets, the heavenly bodies, were moving further and further away from one another. And that meant that if you were to rewind time, everything would be not expanding, but contracting. And if you kept winding back time, eventually everything would come to a single point. All of the things in the known universe would contract and cave in on itself to the point where you have everything in no space. And time itself would then be born because time, space, and matter are all interconnected. You can't have one without the other. And that this is the idea of the Big Bang. So it points to a beginning of the universe. Now, there are many limitations when we're dealing with empirical science. Limitations could be the instrumentation that we use. It could be the amount and types of things that we're able to observe. It could also be within the mind of the observer, right? The human mind has limitations. We're talking a lot about AI nowadays and how computers are able to excel and supersede the ability of the human mind. We have limitations. And there are also philosophical limitations. There are also things that we just can't comprehend. So one of those things is how the universe could go from non-existence into being. How if you wound back the clock and you got to this Big Bang, this very beginning of the universe, what would be before it? Would there be a before it? If you're following the laws of science that are observed in nature, if you were to apply those laws as you turn back the clock and you try to compact everything, the whole known universe, into no space, those laws would cease to function, right? So there's limitations, and the Big Bang is a theory that would never be able to be proved. It can't even really be comprehended. It's something that is beyond the ability of the human mind to penetrate into. Looked at this quote from William Lane Craig, who says that if the universe had a beginning, then it had a cause, which itself must be outside time and space, being immaterial, eternal, powerful, intelligent, and possessing free will. In other words, this cause would have all of the attributes that we apply to God, the one who is outside time and space, immaterial, eternal, powerful, intelligent, and possessing free will. Science and philosophy are pointing in that direction. We talked about the finely tuned universe and how the environment in which we find ourselves, the universe, the solar system, the planet, all of it is finely tuned for life, for existence. And there are, in physics, constants that deal with the physical phenomenon of the universe. Some of them are listed here, like the gravitational constant, electromagnetic force, strong nuclear force, etc. And each of these constants is represented by a number that's extremely precise. And if that number were slightly off, then the universe would collapse on itself, or it wouldn't exist in the way that we have it now, and certainly wouldn't be able to support life. We looked at how astronomically precise these constants are, and we're talking about numbers that really you can't hold in your mind. We attempted to do that by talking about how the gravitational constant was so precise that if you took a tape measure and you extended it from one end of the known universe to the other, and if the measurement were off by a single inch, that the universe could not support itself. The precision is mind-blowing, and that these physical constants are not just precise in and of themselves, but they form an equation. They're interrelated with the others, so that if you were to tweak one, you would have to tweak the others. And the precision, again, is astronomically high. So we talked about the idea of the Goldilocks universe, and this is a term that we know from literature, but it also finds its way into scientific conversation as we look at the fine-tuning of the universe. It's not too hot, not too cold, right? It's not too hard, not too soft. It's just right, almost as if it was designed. We looked at some quotes, even one from Stephen Hawking, who was himself an atheist, and he talks about how the precision is so mathematically improbable. It's remarkable how an atheist would, following the science, have to acknowledge and admit such a statement. So we looked at the chances that this finely tuned universe could happen just at random, and the British physicist Robert Penrose calculated the probability of such a universe to happen, and it was 10 trillion to the 123rd power, a number that, again, like we can't even comprehend how big these numbers are. And it therefore means that it's basically as close to impossible for such a universe to happen by chance as anything you could ever imagine. There's nothing more impossible than the universe that we have now happening at chance. And for those who are committed atheists, like Stephen Hawking, for instance, even though they might acknowledge that it looks like the universe was designed, they're not willing to admit that there is an intelligent designer, that there is a God. So the idea is that of the multiverse, right? That we are just one universe of many universes. In fact, an infinite number of universes. And it just so happens that everything turns out right in our universe. But all of the other universes, it hasn't worked out so well. Now, of course, there are a lot of problems to that. One being that if you had multi-universes, you would have to have some kind of mechanism to produce these universes. And that mechanism would have to be itself very finely tuned. It would have to have an immense, let's say, number crunching ability and the ability to actually produce universes, the power to do that. And where would that multiverse have come from? That would have had to come from some other multiverse producing machine, right? And you have an infinite regression of multiverses now, not just an infinite number of universes, but an infinite number of multiverses, all of which, by the way, are not observed. In fact, actually, not all of which. There is one, our universe. The only observations that we are able to make are of the current universe. So this is a theory, a quote unquote scientific theory to explain the immensely improbable case of our universe arising at random. And as a kind of a joke, people talk about then there must be a universe where Elvis is still alive. There's a universe where my hair is not turning gray. There's a universe where all of my jokes are funny and you laugh at them. There's a universe where everything that could ever possibly be is, right? Because that's the nature of infinity. It's mind-blowing to even try to comprehend an infinite number of universes. But what is even perhaps more difficult to wrap your head around is how this is put forward as the main scientific theory to deal with how finely tuned our universe is, right? This is what the big scientists go to, the multiverse. Then we looked at some quotes from scientists who don't go that direction, but they acknowledge what the data points to, and that's that there is some kind of intelligent designer behind the intelligible universe. And that's where we left off. So today we'll talk a little bit about the origin of life. We'll get into the cell, and we'll prep ourselves for dealing with the theory of evolution. But first, we'll talk about the theory of abiogenesis. So that's the idea that life comes from non-life. So can we have maybe, Suzanne, can you start us off with this one, please?
Sure. The origin of life. The theory of abiogenesis suggests that life began when simple chemicals on Earth combined and eventually formed complex molecules, which then organized into the first simple cells. This theory proposes that life began when simple chemicals in the primordial soup, water, carbon dioxide, and ammonia, mixed and formed more complex molecules with the help of energy from sources like sunlight and lightning. It is hypothesized that these molecules eventually organized into simple cell-like structures called protocells. These protocells would have had basic cell-like properties, including a simple membrane and basic chemical reactions. The theory of evolution suggests that over billions of years, these simple cells evolved, gradually becoming more complex, and that this long process led to the development of various life forms, from the simplest microorganisms to the diverse array of plants, animals, and other organisms we see today.
Thank you, Suzanne. So you can see, by the way, that is a photo of the early Earth, and that lightning that's striking the Earth right there is actually producing the first life. So somehow that was caught on camera, and you can see it before you. Seriously, though, there was an experiment that was done in 1953 that was meant to kind of create in the laboratory what was believed to have happened in early Earth. So can we ask for Elizabeth?
The primordial soup experiment, formerly known as the Miller-Urey experiment, was conducted in 1953 by American scientists Stanley Miller and Harold Urey. It aimed to test the hypothesis that life on Earth could have originated from simple chemical reactions in the early Earth's atmosphere. While the Miller-Urey experiment was initially celebrated as evidence that life could arise through natural processes, subsequent discoveries in biology and chemistry have raised serious doubts about this conclusion. In Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein, published in 1818, the story follows the young scientist Victor Frankenstein, who becomes obsessed with unlocking the secrets of life. Driven by ambition and curiosity, he conducts an unorthodox experiment to create a living being by assembling body parts from corpses and reanimating them through an unspecified process, often interpreted as involving electricity. Both the primordial soup theory and Frankenstein depict life arising through physical, scientific processes rather than divine creation.
But do these stories amount to anything more than science fiction? So that is kind of the question. Most of us would probably say that if you were to put together a bunch of body parts from our fellow human beings and hook it up to some kind of electrical machine, that you probably wouldn't be able to bring this collection of body parts into life. Like it probably wouldn't work. However, that's kind of what is being proposed when we're dealing with abiogenesis, right? The idea that you can have life come from non-life. If you just put together the right ingredients and somehow they're struck by lightning, that you're actually going to have life form. And that was a theory that was held for a long time and is in some cases held by people today who are scientists in the field, but largely it's a theory that has almost no evidence for it. The popular idea among people is that, yeah, that this can happen, and it did happen. But in the scientific community, over the time since 1953, since this first experiment was done, almost no progress has been made. Abiogenesis is basically a farce. It has no scientific proof. And we'll look actually at one of the leading figures in that discussion, Dr. James Torr, in a moment. But it really centers around how complex the cell is. Early on, we didn't realize the immense complexity in single-celled organisms. We had no idea how complex they were. So let's talk a little bit about the history of the cell, our understanding of the cell, and then we'll try to catch everybody up to speed with a short video on how complex the cell is. So Zachary, I think you're up.
Sure. So the cell. A cell is the basic building block of all living things. It's the smallest unit of life that can perform all the necessary functions for an organism to survive and reproduce. Before the invention of microscopes, the concept of cells was not understood. Observations of biological structures were limited to what could be seen with the naked eye. Charles Darwin's view of the cell was quite limited compared to modern understanding. During Darwin's time in the mid-19th century, the cell was largely considered as a simple, homogeneous, and jelly-like structure. The intricacies and complexities of cellular functions and components were not yet discovered. The idea that cells were simple, homogeneous blobs was a common view in the 19th century. This misconception was due to the limitations of the microscopes and scientific knowledge at that time. It wasn't until later that advancements in microscopy and biochemistry revealed the cell's complex structure, including the nucleus, organelles, and the intricate molecular machinery within. We now know that the cell is much more complex and functions like a tiny factory. Inside this factory, there are different machines and workers that perform various tasks. The cell membrane, this is the factory's outer wall. It controls what enters and leaves the cell. Cytoplasm, the jelly-like substance inside the cell where the other components float around. The nucleus, often called the control center, the nucleus contains the cell's genetic material, DNA, and directs all activities of the cell. Organelles, these are the machines inside the cell, each with specific functions. For example, mitochondria produce energy, ribosomes build proteins, and the endoplasmic reticulum helps with synthesis and transport of proteins and lipids. Cells can be very different depending on what they need to do. For instance, muscle cells are designed for movement, while nerve cells are designed for sending signals.
Thank you, Zachary. So everybody can see the diagram to the right. It's a little bit more complex than initially thought. I do have a short film that I'd like to play. And I don't know if I'm going to play the whole thing. Maybe I will. But if I did play the whole thing, it's 10 minutes. And it's kind of a little bit of an introduction to the cell. And you'll see something of the complexity that we're talking about here.
Welcome to this informative video on the cell as the basic unit of life. In this video, we're going to explore the incredible complexity and wonders of life at its most fundamental level. What exactly is a cell? Well, imagine it as the building block of life, the smallest functional unit that makes up all living organisms. Whether it's a tiny bacterium or a mighty oak tree, cells are the foundation upon which life as we know it is built. But don't let their size fool you. Cells are teeming with intricate machinery and processes that keep life going. Cells come in different shapes, sizes, and types, but they all share certain key components. Let's take a closer look at some of these fascinating features. In an animal cell, we have a protective outer boundary called the cell membrane. It acts like a gatekeeper, controlling what goes in and out of the cell. Inside, we find the nucleus, often referred to as the control centers of the cell. It houses the cell's DNA, the genetic blueprint that holds the instructions for all cellular activities. Plant cells, on the other hand, have an additional layer called the cell wall, providing extra support and protection. They also contain chloroplasts, which are like mini solar power plants, capturing sunlight to carry out photosynthesis and produce energy-rich molecules. Now let's dive deeper into the incredible activities happening inside cells. One crucial process is called protein synthesis. Proteins are essential for building and repairing tissues, and they perform various functions within the cell and throughout the body. During protein synthesis, a cell's ribosomes read the instructions from DNA and assemble amino acids into specific protein structures. Another awe-inspiring event is cell division. Cells reproduce and multiply through a process known as mitosis. This ensures that living organisms can grow, repair damaged tissues, and maintain a healthy balance in their bodies. Mitosis is a tightly regulated process, ensuring each new cell inherits a complete set of genetic information. Now, you might be wondering, do cells communicate with each other? Well, they sure do. Cells use various methods to send signals, share information, and coordinate their activities. It's like a busy city with cells buzzing around, exchanging messages, and working together to keep the organism in harmony. Cells exhibit an astounding diversity, tailored to meet the specific needs of different organisms. Let's take a closer look at some noteworthy examples. Prokaryotic cells. These are simple single-celled organisms without a distinct nucleus. Bacteria are a prime example of prokaryotic cells. They possess DNA, ribosomes, and other essential structures, enclosed within a protective cell wall. Eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are more complex and found in plants, animals, fungi, and protists. They have a distinct nucleus enclosed within a nuclear membrane, which houses their genetic material. Eukaryotic cells also contain specialized organelles such as mitochondria, responsible for energy production, and the endoplasmic reticulum, involved in protein synthesis. Mitochondria, often referred to as the powerhouses of the cell, mitochondria generate energy by converting nutrients into adenosine triphosphate. This energy currency fuels cellular activities, enabling organisms to carry out essential functions. Endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum acts as a transportation network within the cell, facilitating the movement of proteins and lipids. It consists of rough endoplasmic reticulum studded with ribosomes that synthesize proteins and smooth endoplasmic reticulum involved in lipid metabolism and detoxification processes. Golgi apparatus. The Golgi apparatus serves as a processing and packaging center. It receives proteins and lipids from the ER, modifies them, and packages them into vesicles for transport to various destinations within or outside the cell. Nucleus. The nucleus houses the cell's DNA, which contains the instructions for the cell's activities. It is like the control center, coordinating and regulating cellular functions by transcribing the DNA into RNA and directing protein synthesis. Cell membrane. The cell membrane is a vital component of cells. It is a selectively permeable barrier that allows the passage of essential substances while keeping harmful ones out. The membrane is composed of a phospholipid bilayer embedded with proteins that aid in various cellular processes such as transportation, signaling, and cell adhesion. Cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton is a network of protein filaments that provide structural support and shape to the cell. It consists of three main components: microtubules, microfilaments, and intermediate filaments. The cytoskeleton also plays a crucial role in cell division, intracellular transport, and cell movement. Lysosomes. Lysosomes are small organelles filled with digestive enzymes. They act as the cell's recycling centers, breaking down waste materials, cellular debris, and engulfed foreign substances through a process called autophagy. Lysosomes also play a role in programmed cell death, also known as apoptosis. Vacuoles. Vacuoles are membrane-bound sacs found in plant and fungal cells, as well as some protists. They serve various functions such as storage of water, nutrients, and waste products. In plant cells, the central vacuole also helps maintain cell turgidity and provides structural support. Chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are unique to plant cells and some protists. They are responsible for photosynthesis, the process by which plants convert sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water into glucose energy-rich molecules and release oxygen as a byproduct. Chloroplasts contain chlorophyll, a pigment that captures light energy. Cell diversity. Cells exhibit incredible diversity across different organisms. For example, neurons are specialized cells found in the nervous system, enabling communication and transmitting signals. Muscle cells contract and generate force, allowing movement. Red blood cells transport oxygen throughout the body, while white blood cells play a crucial role in the immune system's defense mechanisms. Cell adhesion and cell junctions. Cells adhere to each other and form tissue structures through specialized cell adhesion molecules and cell junctions. These adhesive interactions are crucial for maintaining tissue integrity, cell communication, and coordinated movement. Examples of cell junctions include tight junctions, adherens junctions, desmosomes, and gap junctions. Cellular diversity and specialization. Cells exhibit remarkable diversity and specialization across different tissues and organisms. Through the process of cell differentiation, cells acquire specific structures and functions to perform specialized roles. This specialization allows for the organization of cells into tissues, organs, and systems, ensuring the efficient functioning of complex organisms. Cell metabolism. Metabolism refers to all the chemical reactions that occur within a cell to sustain life. It involves processes such as nutrient uptake, energy production through cellular respiration or photosynthesis, and the synthesis of molecules essential for cell growth and maintenance. Cell size. Cells can vary significantly in size. While most cells are microscopic, some can be relatively large. For instance, the chicken egg is a single cell that is visible to the naked eye. The size of cells is influenced by factors such as their function, metabolic requirements, and the organism they belong to. Cell diversity in multicellular organisms. In multicellular organisms, different types of cells collaborate to perform specialized functions. This division of labor allows for the efficient functioning of complex organisms. For example, muscle cells contract to generate movement, while glandular cells secrete hormones or other substances. Cell aging. Cells undergo aging processes influenced by factors such as DNA damage, oxidative stress, and telomere shortening. Aging can lead to a decline in cellular function and is associated with age-related diseases. Research into understanding cellular aging mechanisms may help develop interventions for healthy aging. And there you have it. Thank you for joining us on this educational trip. See you in the next video.
All right, so sorry, I decided to play the whole video because actually on my desk I had a little petri dish and I just whipped up some life in it. I gave it a little shock, and yeah, so it's really easy to do that. And it all happens at random. There's no design at all, no purpose behind it. So anyway, I jest. Obviously, the complexity of a cell is mind-blowing, right? And that video is a presentation on what we currently know. And we're always learning more. The intricacies of the cell and the mystery of life, we're just scratching the surface, right? So this gentleman that I mentioned before, Dr. James Tour, he has a number of videos online where he basically calls out the scientific community and says, put up and I will shut up. He's basically telling the world that we scientists have no idea how life began. No idea whatsoever. And the science bears that out. And if you have anything to say to the contrary, say it. Present your material. And no one is able to step up to the challenge. He puts it like this. He says, if you were to take all of the best scientists in the world, put them together on a team, put them in the best lab, which hasn't been built yet, but would be built with a limitless budget of all of the money in the world, and put them to the sole task of building life from non-life, even putting in all of their intellect, right? The theory is that this happens without any mind, right? Without any intelligence. He's saying you can use your mind. You can use all of the resources available to you. Try to put together everything like a Frankenstein and shock it and bring it to life. You can't do it. And you can not only not do it, you can't even make the first step in that direction, right? So he also has a presentation where he presents the popular understanding of what scientists are able to do. And it's something like 1/3 of people believe that scientists could form a little frog in their laboratory. And 2/3 of people think that scientists can form bacteria and they could generate life in that way. That's the popular misconception today, where he's saying, we don't know the first thing about any of this stuff. We cannot create life. With all of our intelligence, with everything at our disposal, with unlimited budget, we can't make a single step in the right direction. And not only that, but he says we, as a scientific community, are deceiving the world. We're deceiving the people at the kind of the lower levels, if you will, of scientific understanding. So here's you can read some quotes here. And I think we're back to Suzanne, is that right?
Yes. Dr. James Tour, a leading synthetic organic chemist and nanotechnologist, is a vocal critic of the current state of abiogenesis research. He argues that scientists have made little progress in explaining how life could have originated from non-living matter through natural processes. The origin of life community has not even begun to address the real issues in the origin of life. We have no idea how to build the molecules of life, let alone how to assemble them into a functioning system. Scientists are nowhere close to understanding how life started. The confidence you hear in public about life's origin is completely unjustified. In private, scientists will tell you that we are clueless about how life could have arisen from non-living chemicals.
Thank you, Suzanne. So if people want more information, look at Dr. James Torr's presentations.
Yes.
He's really challenging the scientific community, as he says here, to put up and he will shut up. But it's really great when you have scientists who are able to kind of speak outside of the consensus, because sometimes the consensus isn't really based upon the data and the evidence. It's based upon an ideology. And that, I think we're hopefully having our eyes open to more and more, that ideology runs a lot of this world. And that includes parts of the scientific community. All right, so that's the theory of abiogenesis, which in a way is tied to DNA. So let's talk a little bit about DNA. Elizabeth, can you take this one for us, please?
DNA is the instruction manual for all living things, and its structure was elucidated by James Watson and Francis Crick in 1953. DNA is a long, twisted molecule made up of two strands that look like a ladder. Each rung of the ladder is made up of four types of building blocks called nucleotides, letters A, T, C, and G, which pair up in specific ways. These nucleotides spell out genetic codes that tell your cells how to make proteins, which are essential for everything your body does. DNA determines your traits like eye color and height, and it is passed down from your parents. It's found in every cell and is key to understanding how life works.
So thank you, Elizabeth. So this chapter in Orthodoxy 2.1 is entitled The Logos. And the Logos is the reason, it's the principle, it's also the word behind everything. And we have already talked about St. Maximus, who speaks to us about not just the Logos as God, but the Logi, his words that are inherent in creation. You see that most powerfully in life, right? Because living creatures have DNA, which is an instruction manual. It's written in a code. It's words, it's a language, and it tells life how to develop, how it's to form, how it's to grow, how it's all these cells are interact with one another. Everything is specified in the DNA. Nothing happens at random. Everything happens as it's instructed to happen. And the question isn't so much then just if you could get all the right chemicals together and strike it by lightning, right? You could get life. No, life is information based. Where does the information come from? Where is the data and the language and the words in the DNA? Where does that come from? Does it come from something at random, or does it come from a mind? So here's a little bit more about DNA. And are we to Zachary now?
Sure. Information in DNA is stored in more than just a straight line of letters A, T, C, and G. Think of it like a super complex multi-layered puzzle where there's more happening than just the order of pieces. Here's how it works. Folding and shape. Imagine folding a piece of paper with a code written on it. Depending on how you fold it, different parts of the code might line up or become hidden. DNA works similarly. It folds up inside your cells in a specific way, and this folding can hide or reveal certain genes. This means only certain instructions are available at certain times. Sticky notes, epigenetic tags. Picture putting sticky notes on different parts of the paper. Some notes might say, read this first, or ignore this part. In DNA, there are chemical tags that act like sticky notes. These tags can turn genes on or off without changing the actual sequence. They add another layer of control over how the information is used. 3D connections. Imagine if paper was crumpled into a ball and now parts of the code that were far apart are suddenly next to each other. In DNA, the 3D shape brings different parts of the sequence closer together, allowing them to interact and work together in ways that wouldn't happen if the DNA were in a straight line. Time and environment. Think of certain instructions appearing only at specific times or under certain conditions, like a magic ink that only shows up when it's warm. In DNA, different genes are turned on or off at different times based on signals from the environment or during different stages of life. This timing adds another dimension to how DNA's information is used.
Thank you, Zachary. So this is part of the reason why Bill Gates said DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created, right? Because it's not just a set of linear instructions where you just go from 1 to 2 to 3, right? The DNA can be read in multiple ways. It is read in multiple ways to perform multiple functions with the same data. It's kind of like if picture this as an illustration. You're in a library and it's filled with hundreds of thousands of books, millions of books, right? You could read each of those books from cover to cover and understand one level of that meaning. Another level might be you take the first book on the shelf and you turn to page 67 and you read the 44th word on that page. Then you go to the second book and you go to that same page and read that same word, and that's your second word in the sentence. And you go around the whole library, and now you're reading a whole nother story that is written within other stories. Are you following this? Right? So that's one illustration of how you have the same data that is used in multiple ways to direct the creation and sustenance of life. Who's able to do that, right? I mean, I have trouble if I'm playing Scrabble to line up like my word, match it onto another word, and then line it up with a third word. Like that's difficult for me, right? The intellect behind DNA it's greater than anything we could ever imagine, right? And not only that, it's not just that these words are written, but they're written in chemical form. So there's molecules. This is all written in the material of biology. It's written in these chemicals. And by the way, one of the problems with abiogenesis is chemicals, some are more stable than others, but you have to keep them in pure form, and you have to keep them from deteriorating, right? So even if you were to line up all the right chemicals to have the DNA in place, which is like, again, nobody could even imagine how you would do that. But even if you could, and you put it all together, by the time things would start to like come together, the building blocks would already become unstable. It would already have decomposition. So some people say that, well, time is the savior to all of this, right? Time is the hero of the plot. If you had enough time, yeah, the incomprehensibly improbable would happen eventually, right? Because you just have enough time. The problem is time is working against us when we're dealing with chemistry and biology, because these ingredients are deteriorating. So I wanted today to kind of present some information about how complex the cell is, how mysterious life is, how little we have made as far as progress to producing life. We basically know nothing. And we also know a lot. Like that video, and there will be a test on that, by the way. Everyone hopefully was paying attention. That video just poured information over us, like from beginning to end, right? It was overwhelming. We can see a lot, right? We can see a lot in the beauty and the order and the majesty of God's creation, but we have no idea how to produce it. No idea, right? So we can recognize that this creation is the hands of God, at the hands of God. He was the one who worked this wonder, but we have no idea how to work it ourselves. None. We don't even know where to begin. So anyway, this is again just kind of some introductory material. We'll talk more about single-celled organisms, and I do want to get into also a little bit about genetic mutations and natural selection, and we'll get into the theory of evolution next time.